welcome back to the Hearts podcast. I am your host Tabitha, and today we're going to talk about something that sits heavy in the soul. We are going to talk about loss and grief, that quiet, unspoken ache that settles into the spaces we once filled with love. The kind of grief that doesn't just take something from us, but forces us to meet ourselves in a way that we never expected. This podcast isn't just about loss. It's also about love. It's about what it means to truly witness another soul and to love them through their most vulnerable moments, and to be left sitting in the wreckage of what was, wondering how to carry it forward. So, trigger warning, if you aren't ready to discuss this on your path, I completely understand and skip to the next episode. But if you are, welcome. Now, I'm going to try and talk about this without a wavering voice, but I cannot promise, so here goes. This is the whole reason that I talk about these things in my art. But anyway, here goes. So, grief isn't linear. It doesn't follow a timeline, and it doesn't just fade away because we wish it would. It lingers in the spaces in between our days, in the quiet moments when we think we're okay, in the unexpected ways life triggers memories we thought we'd tucked away. And for me, losing my dad was one of those moments. His passing didn't just bring up the immediate pain of losing him. It cracked open a door that I had kept shut for years, which was the loss of my sister in my childhood. These were wounds that I thought I'd outgrown, but I'd simply buried under the busyness of life. And suddenly, I wasn't grieving just one person, I was grieving two. But here's the thing, grief doesn't ask for permission. It moves through you, whether you're ready or not. And in that moment, I had two choices. I could let it consume me, or I could find a way to transmute it. And the only way I knew how was how I'd done so many years before with my sister, which was through art. There is something about watching someone you love suffer that changes you. You sit there and you're unable to fix it, and you're unable to fade it, and you're unable to shift it into something less painful for either of you. So you just exist with it. And it's raw, and it's unsettling, and it's terrifying. Because at the heart of love, it makes us want to protect, and it makes us want to hold, and it makes us want to heal. But grief is different. Grief demands that we do the opposite. It asks us to stay. It asks us to sit with the discomfort, to witness it without any interference, and to love without needing to control. And that, in my opinion, is one of the hardest things in the world. Watching my dad fade, and I could talk about many tiny moments which sit so deeply with me during that time, but I won't because I'll pull my eyes out. But watching him fade and knowing there was nothing I could do to stop it, it was like standing on the edge of something that I couldn't define. And it took me right back to where I was as a 16-year-old girl and losing my little sister. And I realized then that real love, it isn't about fixing, it's just about presence. It's about being there even when being there means feeling helpless. It's about witnessing someone's entire journey and holding space for that in the in-between. There's something about stories that just help us make sense of our own, and I've been thinking a lot about the new Bridget Jones' Diary movie and about how even in light-hearted stories there's an undeniable truth about what it means to love and to lose. Because love is not just the good parts, it's not just the moments where everything makes sense, it's also the spaces in between, the loneliness, the longing, the nights spent staring at the ceiling, trying to understand where the heck you're going to go from here. Bridget Jones's journey was never just about finding love. It was about allowing herself to be loved and to be seen and to be vulnerable in the messiness of life. And isn't that what grief asks of us? To allow ourselves to be completely, uncomfortably and truthfully ourselves with every part of our heart exposed? I myself have never been able to face my grief head on. I couldn't sit down and talk about it in a way that made sense. But art gave me a place to put it. Because there's something about creating without expectation that heals you. I can paint a perfectly beautiful, detailed portrait, but the act of putting my thoughts onto a page, whether it's through words or sketches or movement or sound, is making marks that are unjudged or without any expectation. That's where I find the magic of art. It's like releasing something you didn't even know you were holding. And that's the beauty of it, because art doesn't ask you to explain yourself. It doesn't ask for a structured narrative. It just gives you space. It gives you a place where your pain can exist without it consuming you. And I'm not talking about painting masterpieces or sculpting great works, although that can be quite fun in itself. I am talking about slowing down, reconnecting with the parts of yourself that feel lost in the heaviness of it all. Sitting down with a sketchbook, letting your hand move without expectation, writing down fragmented thoughts in a journal, taking long walks in nature, and simply observing the textures, the movement, and the colours all around you. Letting yourself be immersed in something outside of your own mind. And in that space, for me, something incredible happened. The weight of grief didn't disappear, but it softened. The art of creating, of making something, even something small, especially something that didn't matter, became a bridge back to myself and a reminder that I could hold pain and beauty at the same time. And I want you to know this. You do not need to be an artist to use creativity in this way. You don't need to be good at art. You don't even need to show anyone. But the simple act of creating without judgment, without expectation, can give your emotions a place to exist outside of you. And sometimes that's all we need. For me, my soul knew what to do when my mind didn't. My brush moved before my thoughts could form, and my journal pages filled before I even understood what I was writing. And that in itself was really healing, because sometimes you don't need to understand your grief to process it. Sometimes you don't need to understand your pain to sit with it. If you're listening to this and thinking, but I'm not creative, I wouldn't even know where to start, I hear you, and I promise it doesn't have to be complicated. Here are a few practices that you can do just to help. Morning rituals, talk about this all day, every day. Big part of the Hearts Academy, but you can just start your day with a journal entry or a simple sketch. It doesn't have to make sense. Just get something onto the page. Freeform drawing is a really good way. You can just let your hand move across the page, scribble, make shapes, let your mind wander. And music and movement. Let your body respond to sound. Move, sway, stretch. Somatically let your body process. Let it be an intuitive experience, because your whole body holds trauma. Every single cell. And so the way you're doing this is you are letting your mind and your body express and release some of that grief without having to outwardly experience it right in your face, which can be really hard. And for those who really struggle with verbal processing, especially masculine energy, where talking about emotions might feel uncomfortable, these forms of creative expression can be a lifeline. You don't have to explain yourself, you don't have to put into words what you're feeling, you just have to do. And let the doing become its own kind of release. Sometimes you just need to let it flow, give it form, and let it exist outside of you so that it doesn't break you from the inside. There's a poem that has lived inside of me for years. I was introduced to it while traveling around Europe in my 20s, and it's called The Invitation by Orion Mountain Dreamer. And if you've never read it, I really do urge you to, because it's not about romance, it's about being seen, and it's so beautiful. It says, I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for your adventure of being alive. And God, isn't that everything? Isn't that what love is, what grief is? The willingness to risk everything, to risk our hearts, our comfort, our certainty, just to experience something real. It continues on. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it, to fade it, or to fix it. And this is the line that wrecks me every time, because grief is that exact space, and love is that exact space. It's the space where you sit, that you're not fixing it. That state that you have to stay even when every part of you wants to run. And maybe that's the most important thing we can do for ourselves, is to allow ourselves to sit with our grief just as we sat with love. To not turn away from it, to not try and fix it, to simply let it be a part of us as the love once was. I don't have an answer to grief. I don't have a way to make it easier, but I do know this: love and loss are woven from the same thread. And if we can allow ourselves to love fully, then we must also allow ourselves to grieve fully, to sit with it and to create from it, to hold it the way that it held us. So if you are in the midst of grief, know that you're not alone, and know that you don't have to understand it right now. You don't have to fix it. You just have to be with it. And maybe in time you'll find a way to create something from it, something beautiful, something true, something that reminds you that love, no matter how painful, was always worth it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this incredibly personal post. And thank you for allowing me to share this space with you. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And as always, keep creating, keep feeling, and keep allowing yourself to transform. Until next time.